The La Jolla Symphony and Chorus will debut a world premiere piece from San Diego composer Sang Song in its concerts happening this weekend. He's the winner of this year's Nee Commission, named in honor of longtime artistic director Thomas Nee, which is granted to up-and-coming UC graduate student composers. Song wrote his new work specifically for the players in the La Jolla Symphony. He spoke with KPBS arts producer and editor Julia Dixon Evans about his intriguing piece that has some unexpected theatrical elements. Here's their conversation.
So you wrote your composition, Frozen Grief, specifically with the La Jolla Symphony in mind. How did the symphony inspire this piece?
As you may be aware, La Jolla Symphony is a community orchestra, which means that they're not professionals, but the level of their playing is just, in some sense, they're better than some of the professional orchestras. And in terms of dedication, I think they're just not unmatched. So their playing and their dedication and artistry and expertise, everything really, really inspired me and blow me away. So it really got me going. And then I decided to take this particular subject because I don't know if you know about the term ambiguous loss and frozen grief, but those are the notions that proposed by psychiatrist Pauline Boss. And her theory is that there are certain losses that don't have closures. So those griefs stay with us like frozen. And I found the idea really inspiring. You may recall at the beginning of the pandemic, people were dying because of COVID, and yet they were not getting proper funerals because of health concerns, right? So, and some students had to graduate without getting a proper graduation ceremony, and according to Professor Boss, that could result in ambiguous losses and therefore frozen grief. So I decided to take that theme as the subject matter, quote unquote, of my piece. And then, in addition to that, I was inspired by Joseph Haydn's, the Austrian composer Joseph Haydn's Farewell Symphony. So I sort of built that idea into the piece later on.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about Haydn's Farewell Symphony and how they're connected?
Sure. So there's a little story behind the genesis of the Haydn's Farewell Symphony, which is that Haydn was at that point hired by Prince Esterházy in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and so the Prince Esterházy was spending a summer with all the musicians in his favorite summer palace, and the stay was getting extended beyond the musicians' expectations. So the musicians became really homesick at some point, and so they came up to Haydn, who was the Kapellmeister, the music director basically of the orchestra, court orchestra, and Haydn came up with an idea. Instead of talking to Prince Esterházy and complaining about the situation, he decided to write a symphony. And what happens in the symphony is that it proceeds as if just like a typical symphony, but in the last movement, the music suddenly becomes slower and then softer, and then musicians just leave the stage one by one. So Haydn was trying to convey the idea that the musicians wanted to leave, right? So the Prince Etzarti got the idea, and then he promptly returned to Vienna, to the relief of the musicians. But I wanted to sort of create an updated version of that symphony. So what happens in my piece is that I thought about making the musicians leave the stage just as Haydn did, but then Haydn only had probably about like 20 musicians in the orchestra, but in the La Jolla Symphony we have close to 100. So making them leave the stage would be a disaster. Well, maybe not a disaster, but it probably is a safety hazard, right? So I had to come up with some clever idea to represent the same idea without risking anybody's safety. So what happens in my piece is that towards the end of the second movement, the stage light goes dark, and they're only the musicians are relying on the music stand lamps on their music stands. And once each musician is done with their final notes, they turn off their music stand lamps. So at the end, it's just the conductor.
You have said how the pandemic shaped this composition and the creative process, but this performance is also just the second time the La Jolla Symphony has performed live since the pandemic. And how does this idea of frozen grief, how does that influence performance too? Is there an influence?
Well, I'm not performing myself, so it's hard to tell. But I would assume that it has a profound impact on the orchestra musicians. Like I mentioned, they're second to none in terms of dedication. But I have the sense that they're even more dedicated to do their best in this environment, because it's something I guess you had taken for granted before the pandemic, but now we all know that every moment is precious, right? So I think that really creates a wonderful environment especially for people like me, because this is a new piece, so nobody knows how it's supposed to sound except for me, and to an extent the conductor. So it takes a lot of patience and love, actually. It's been, we've been rehearsing this piece for almost a month now, and working with Professor Jeffrey Malicki, who's conducting the orchestra for these concerts, and the trombone soloist Burke Schneider, and all the musicians of the orchestra. It's been a privilege and joy to work with them, and I'm really, really enjoying every second of it.
Sang, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for your time.
That was composer Sang Song speaking with KPBS art producer and editor Julia Dixon Evans. Song's new composition will be performed for the first time on December 3rd and 4th, part of the La Jolla Symphony and Chorus's Passionate Voices program. You can find more information about that at ljsc.org.